All right, Andrew Easton here from the ESUCC. I'm joined by Vern Fisher of Gibbon Public Schools, and we're going to explore the topic of the structures that are in place, those scheduled times we need to reflect and kind of adjust our plans, particularly in that remote setting. And so I want to welcome Vern and just kind of dive right into it here and ask, what are some of the structures that are in place within Gibbon that kind of look to be responsible for and responsive to some of those maybe potential changes?
Well, Andrew, how are you doing today?
I love you're always starting on that offbeat. I'm good at it. I'm really good.
Hey, there's a reason why the star blank is behind me, right?
Oh yeah, why is that?
Good, I would say I'm the star, man.
Oh, hey, this is your show, and we've established in previous collaborations.
Sorry, I should have been quiet. So, what are the structures that we have in place, and how do we schedule time? So in Gibbon, we really, our structures in a normal setting would be our school improvement team meets once a month. Our school improvement team is the academic arm. They identify the plan, the strategy, and monitor that plan. But we're also a school district that falls under the umbrella of professional learning communities. So we have collaborative teams at grade level and in content area that meet every other week for 2-hour windows. And their primary focus at this point in our journey is looking at our curriculum, our priority standards, how are we defining the level of performance and what's acceptable levels for proficiency, and then also how we assess student learning. So in a traditional setting, that's how we would look, and that would continue if we move into a remote setting. We do add one more element, and it was called, or they are called, the continuation of learning team. And they're looking primarily at subgroups of kids. So we move from meeting once a month as a school improvement team to meeting weekly. And it's the same time each week. And then our continuation of learning team meets immediately after that. So there's a coordination of effort. There's a feedback loop between those two teams, ensuring that our needs are met both within the classroom setting in terms of student learning, but also supporting teachers in terms of professional development, what other strategies are necessary to help them be successful in a remote setting. That collaborative team, though, is really important because they talk about, okay, of the priority standards that we've identified, the standards that we expect all kids to know and be able to do. We know that looks different in a remote learning environment. So we're going to talk about, as we transition into remote and back out into a natural learning environment, what standards do we agree that will hit really hard to ensure that learning continues, but it prepares our kids for the next level of learning. They'll also talk about how they'll assess that in a remote setting. Assessment in a remote learning environment looks much different, or it could look much different. So they're going to talk about what evidence do we need to collect along the way that says, hey, you know what, yeah, this guy is getting, he understands the knowledge, skills, dispositions that we expect him to know and be able to do. But this student over here is really struggling, and we need to provide additional time and help for them. So there are two layers of support for both kids and teachers in terms of learning in a remote setting. Those PLCs, even if we were to move into a remote environment, they know they meet every other Monday for 2 hours. They know what that window looks like, and they know what's expected of them. And the fact is, because we trust them, we know they're making really good decisions on what standards that they're going to focus on and how they assess that work.
And that's, I just love that that's a continuation of things that have already clearly been established within the culture, both in terms of just the logistical time that you have set aside to do that, but then also those expectations and those routines that then I think make the transition to doing that. It's got to be a little more seamless. I can hear that in your answer. Hey, go ahead.
Well, teachers and families need predictability and consistency. They don't need something new to add to their stress. So if you have really solid structures in place, they should move in and out of different settings seamlessly. And our families and our teachers should also know what that looks like regardless of what setting we're in. So if we can bring predictability and consistency to the lives of our family in the educational world and our families at home, that will help us reach more kids and successfully reach more kids along the way.
Yeah, and I think with that understanding what's expected and the familiarity, those things allows you then to be able to process the moment a little bit more. And so I'd kind of pivot a little bit too into saying that I would imagine then because those routines are in place and there is kind of this ongoing feedback loop in the communication between the groups, but I'm sure obviously with the administrative team as well, that it's got to help in adjusting your plans, which everyone's had to be agile during this time, flexible to the moment and responsive to, numbers and cases and a myriad of circumstances. So could you give us an example maybe of how these teams or one of your groups, for example, was instrumental in making some of those adjustments?
Well, a really good example is the main mechanism for delivering instruction was through Zoom. So teachers were using Zoom across the board. And what was happening and the feedback coming from our teachers, our kids, and our parents was a student could have multiple Zoom sessions scheduled at the same time in 3 different content areas. And so students were trying to weave in and out of a schedule that really was not predictable and added a burden to them in terms of trying to monitor where they were supposed to be at any given time, making sure they were staying current with the work that they were expected to turn in, and engaged in a learning process that was really much different than what they were experienced with or what they're accustomed to. So what we did is, based off that feedback, is we created what was called a district Zoom schedule. So we have identified specific times at both the elementary and the secondary that our kids know when they're Zooming and what the topic is. So as an example, on Monday and Wednesdays, those are our odd period days. So the primary day for use of Zoom for a teacher in period 1 is Monday, but they also know they have a second time slot protected for them on Wednesdays. Even periods, the same thing. Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then Friday's a work day where they can engage, provide additional time and support for parents or kids, contact parents, and or work in their PLCs. So although learning will continue every day for our students, we wanted to make sure we had one-on-one time between our educator and the student, where questions could be asked, where they could elaborate on a key concept or skill. And the feedback so far is that has been a good move when we have kids in a new or in a remote setting.
That's really, again, in part why we're interested in doing so much of this work and providing resources at this time, because we recognize that even certainly since March through May, and even since the start of this year, as certain plans were put into place, that some of those are having to change, adjust, flex, or deal with larger numbers. And as a result of all of that, we are having some conversations about things like structures in place to make adjustments. Sounds like you're doing that there. And so thanks for your time and sharing some of the things that Gibbon Public Schools have been doing in support of their remote learners.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Go Buffs.